Mhm.
Uh, Hello, everyone. Again, this is Karthik Kandamuri. This is our blog, Enterprise Americans. We have been covering healthcare for the past 3 weeks. And the reason why we were covering healthcare is the currently pandemic COVID-19 is hitting the entire globe. So we thought focus on healthcare in USA is very critical topic. But today, what I'm going to talk about is holistic healthcare. Holistic healthcare is covering your physical health, mental health, lifestyle, longevity, and family values. And I found, as always, a great author and a friend of mine who has a great perspective on all of these issues related to healthcare. And I welcome Jerry Rhodes to my show, and very happy to get him on my show today. Jerry is an author and a professional, and I don't want to talk for him. I would like Jerry to introduce himself, and we'll go from there. Jerry, welcome on board. Please introduce yourself to my audience.
Hello, Karthik. It's good to be back again. My name is Jerry Rhodes. I'm a CPA by profession. I guess you could pretty much say healthcare has been my career, either consulting with people or accounting for their errors and their successes, materially and financially. And also I have been an owner of 3 nursing homes. And so at this point, I feel that I have a pretty good background for the topic. I've spent 55, 60 years of my career dealing with healthcare and how it affects Americans. And I do believe that health is a big factor in succumbing to any virus, and particularly the COVID virus.
Thank you, Jerry, for that introduction. I like the background. You have virtual background. Excellent. New York, though we cannot really travel to New York today, I love your background picture today. Um, coming to the topic, so I want to talk about, if you look at the number of deaths in US, as you know, it is number one so far in deaths, but US will lose that first place by tomorrow because India is taking number one position now with the number of COVID cases. Though the number of deaths are very low compared to United States, but India is taking the infamous place, if you will, being the number one country with maximum number of COVID infections. However, the reason why I'm bringing up India into this conversation is, though India is going to be mostly, the country with highest number of COVID infections, the recovery rate surprisingly is about 75 to 80% of the percentage of people are recovering from
Yes.
and that is number one. And number two, the number of deaths are very, very low compared to US. And many doctors and epidemiologists are saying that it is related to immunity of the people who are living in that country. And
Yeah.
immunity obviously is related to the food habits. I want you to give your perspective going to American way of life. I want you to go back to into your childhood life and tell me how your upbringing was, what kind of food habits Americans used to have, what kind of exercising habits and lifestyle.
Okay, that goes back into ancient history.
Not so ancient. You don't look old at all. So
No, I don't feel it either, but I like to think young, and the philosophy is the younger you think, the younger you can at least be. But anyway, my background goes back to a small town in Iowa. 5,000 was the population. In the 40s, it was called God's Little Acre because there was no alcohol allowed. There was no cigarettes allowed. I could go into some other things that weren't allowed, but I don't think that's proper right now. But it was called God's Little Acre. And the upbringing was that of not just a small town, but a surrounding agricultural environment, culture. And in that and my grandparents owned and ran a farm. My grandparents had a farm. My dad's brothers had farms. And so I spent a lot of time there, just helping them do certain chores, as they called it. So early on, I was very active in that respect. And then my father, who never wanted to be in farming and was never farming, was a laborer. He was a bricklayer for years, and then he took employment with Firestone in Des Moines and traveled back and forth every day. His job was initially was just on the production line, and he was a union worker.
Mm-hmm.
And his only desire, because he always said, "I don't want any responsibility. I just want to have my job and take care of my family and come home every day and not have to worry about the job." So that's pretty much the culture in our home. It was pretty, since they were depression babies, it was not the most loving, huggy, kissy kind of environment. It just wasn't. It was more or less the attitude is that we have to work to live. And so I was brought up that we weren't deprived to the point of being hungry or anything like that, but we certainly didn't have more than we needed. And my mother was very cautious that way in terms of spending and preparation of food. And so there usually was just barely enough for the portions. And
That's
so,
great. Actually, you brought up 3 points. I want you to take 3 points from here. One is, number one, it's surprising that your village or your town didn't have cigarettes and alcohol. Number one, that's the number one vice.
and,
So there was no
and,
vices.
and no teen pregnancies.
Okay, that's the third thing, which is
It
very,
was,
very
it was, it was taboo. I
right,
mean, there were a very few,
right,
but that was
right.
the other thing that impacted the
So,
community.
so number one is there was no smoking allowed in the village, and number two, there was no alcohol allowed. That itself is a great you know um, deterrent, if you will. Number two, number three, your dad was the only one working or earning member of the family, and your mom used to make food at home instead of going to
Yes.
buying outside food. So three things come out of it. Number one, people were eating healthy food and people were not spending money on alcohol or smoking. And number three, they were all hardworking people. I think that contributes a lot to the work ethic of education, because that's,
Yeah.
if they are not doing farming, what else will they do? They'll study something, right?
Yes, there were small business in the town, the pharmacies and grocery store. Hy-Vee, which is now a giant company, started its second store was in Indianola, Iowa. The original one was in Sheridan. So it had a thriving community in terms of small businesses, particularly since it was during the Second World War. As we came out of the Second World War, the community grew and became more like a suburb of Des Moines eventually. But the other thing I wanted to mention too is I mentioned teen pregnancies. There was a high rate of percentage of kids at the school that graduated from high school. They didn't necessarily go to college. That was a smaller percentage because that wasn't the thinking then, that you had to have a college education. But also, divorce was frowned on.
Hmm.
The community had its certain mores, and one was if you get pregnant as a teenager, then you're going to be dropped out of school, and divorces, if you get divorced, you probably have to leave the community. So that's a really kind of narrow culture or community in terms of violating any social mores. And we also had a teenage center where we could go every night. It had music and it had TV, and later in the 40s, and it was a place to just go and meet girls and shoot pool. keep you away from carousing. And so the environment was conducive to being healthy, uh, more happy if you have those kind of relationships. And in the high schools, there were cliques and that. And I met my wife when she was 14 years old, and we've been together almost ever since.
Wow.
So that leads to a good mental, happy condition that is a little unique. Now you move that forward to the 50s, and rock and roll is introduced, and these mopeds come from England, and the styles are changing all the time, and all of a sudden, what we used to be confined by in Indianola, as I came out of high school into college and out of college to Chicago, were so dramatically different. And
Right.
I'm not saying they were bad or good, because I thought Indianola was too confining, and when we got to Chicago, I thought it was too liberal.
Right. So I had
So
one question for you. So you said that education, majority of the people went to high school. They did not drop out of the high school. They at least finished their high school. And then some of the people actually, though the percentage of people who graduate went to undergrads are lower, but you seem to have done your completed your undergrad as well as your
yeah,
CPA. So were you the first
yeah.
person to have accomplished a master's degree in your family?
I didn't get a master's. I got the CPA, but I did get a BS, Bachelor in Science and Business Administration.
Hmm.
I was the first person in my immediate family to not, well, maybe even graduate high school. My dad and mother both left school in the 8th grade. Now, this was
Okay.
in the late 20s and 30s when we had the Depression, and they were expected to get the basic learning and go to work on the farm or go to work, uh, you know, trying to earn some money. So I was the first in our immediate family to get out of high school and then out of college as well. I had an uncle that graduated from college after he was in World War II, but we were the only two. I'm not sure what the statistics are in our family now, but I was one of the first. And I did not want to work in the I worked at the factory one summer. That's Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, and found out that I just couldn't understand why, when we went to a union meeting, the union was against the corporate executives, and the corporate people were against the unions. Really didn't get a cooperative environment. Even when you were on the production line, there was a lot of horsing around, and it was just kind of a job that wasn't um, conducive to being happy with
Hmm.
what you're doing. It was dirty. It was in some ways depressing.
So which was
But
the kind of a motivator for getting higher education, so get a better job?
yes, I was in college at that point, so it was a summer job. And my other two summer jobs, one was at a gas station, the other one was spraying weeds out in
In the
the
farm.
dirt roads of and at $1.10 an hour. And we worked about 100 hours a week to get time and a half, so we could make $100 a week.
Hmm.
So, that was enough to say, hey, I want to finish my college education. But when I got into the period where I had to start the interview and decide what if I was going to get a job outside of Indianola. Sherry and I, at that point, were married. We got married when I was a junior.
Hmm.
My grades improved immensely once I got married, by the
Oh, I
way.
see. That
And
contributed to your increased grades, right? Improved
yes,
grades, right?
so there was no more running around. Um, so when I started the interview process, um, I really, the views that I had were all in sales, either selling insurance or encyclopedias or pots and pans or insurance policies. Nothing really stuck, and I really didn't feel that I had much accounting, but my best interview was with Arthur Anderson, a public accounting firm in Chicago. And my professor pushed my name to them because I graduated as the top business graduate, and they only hired one person a year. So fortunately, he backed me, and I got the job uh, in Chicago. And then he and I both went to the training school in Chicago, which was 4 weeks of a boot camp. And I had never run an adding machine. I really hadn't done any accounting. My whole curriculum was principally liberal arts.
Mm.
And so the courses I liked best, sociology, psychology, well, I liked economics, statistics, I hated that. So it was really strange that here I am, I'm getting recruited by an accounting firm with this liberal arts background. Well, they liked that. They wanted me to become a consultant. They didn't want me to become an auditor.
Mm.
But I'm sorry, when I got there, you're going to have to be an auditor.
Right.
You're going to have to learn business.
Before I talk, before you go in much deeper into your career, I want to ask a question related to your small town, Iowa, to Chicago. I want to pivot because you told your experience about working in a Firestone for summer, and working in a gas station, as well as weeds in the roads. So these are all summer jobs that really taught you the hard working ethic. Now,
Yes.
the other aspect I wanted to ask you was, you know, in terms of food habits, you mentioned that your mom used to cook at home, but what are the other typically what was the kind of diet you used to have? What kind of food you used to have at
It
home?
was meat and potatoes. It was not exactly the whole food pyramid. I mean, I think the first pizza I ever had was out of a box, and that was when everybody was discovering pizza.
Hmm.
But that was rare, and so it was mainly beef, pork, potatoes, and we had a garden. We raised our vegetables, and my mother canned them and put them in our cellar, so we always had vegetables. And she was a very good cook. We typically would have what we called breakfast. Um, we didn't call it lunch. We called that. Uh, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, we called that supper. No, dinner. That we called that dinner, and then the evening meal was supper. My wife is coaching me from the
Oh,
background
so
here.
dinner was an afternoon lunch, was called as dinner in those days?
It was lunch, yes,
Oh,
and
wow.
the big meal was supper,
I see.
and
I
we
see.
didn't have a dessert with the dinner meal. We had one with the supper meal, and that it was just the Iowa tradition, and
And what was the
so,
kind of desserts you used to have?
well, my mother would bake cookies, bake pies, bake bread as a part of the meal. So a lot of that, nothing really processed.
Nothing
We didn't
exactly.
really.
That is, I think you hit the nail on the head. I was coming to that. And number one, and then so the processed food was very limited, if you will. And outside food like pizza and all that was a novelty. Maybe once in a while you try,
Yeah.
but majority of the food was home cooked food, and where the amount of sugar which goes into the desserts are controlled. And what kind of vegetables you used to grow in your in your backyard?
The green beans,
Mm.
cabbage, onions, potatoes, carrots, all kinds of beans,
Mm.
strawberries. We had some grapevines, um, and that was typically my job. After my dad and I started it, he had to help plow it to get it, but it took up probably a good 10 yards by 30 yards backyard.
Mm.
And that was every spring we would get it ready, and then we would plant it, and I had to do the weeding. And then my mother and I and my sister would do the
The planting.
cultivating.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, the
Oh,
planting and the cultivating. My dad helped with the planting. And
So
so
I
that
think
was,
that's great because the tradition was more home cooked food, backyard vegetables. So the content was, though you did not strictly follow the food pyramid, you had predominantly a lot of vegetables and good, healthy food and healthy activity you had with no vices. And how did now? Let me pivot to your career. When you moved to Chicago, what kind of food you used to eat, and what kind of, one thing I would like to I wanted to ask you also is, how was your exercise routine in those days? How people used to keep themselves
okay.
physically fit, whether your dad or your mom?
Well, my dad, he worked hard in the factory, so he really didn't have a exercise outside of other than we did uh, uh, rehab our home.
Hmm.
Our second home had to be rehab, so
Hmm.
he remodeled the whole thing, of which I helped him do. But so he didn't have much of an exercise program. My mother, uh, they didn't go out and walk. They didn't have um, any exercise equipment. In those days, we didn't know what a vegetarian was. It was all meat and potatoes. And I did want to point out one of the major impacts on my life in terms of discipline was sports. I was always into sports. I was obsessed with sports because you could see results. Didn't take long to see if you built your skills, whether you're going to do well or not. So I played baseball, basketball, football, tennis, and worked in no running in those days. That came later. But I was always pretty much wanted to be in shape the year round.
Mm.
And we didn't call it in shape. I weighed 142 pounds when I graduated from high school. I was 5'8", 5'7" or 8. And I always wanted to weigh 175. Well, my first year of college, going to college, and I went to the college in my hometown, so I didn't live on campus, but I joined a fraternity and I was at a fraternity a lot, and I proceeded to put on about 20 pounds that first freshman year because it was the whole um, scene was changed.
Mm.
There, I was eating out. I was eating stuff I probably shouldn't have, drinking beer, that sort of thing. And until I got married, and then I started losing, got back down to a better weight. And so I wanted to point that out, as I think that had a great impact on how I'm so disciplined today, because I work out, I do something in terms of a out every day. And I used to run every day, and I'm too obsessed in many ways. But
That's
that has
that's that's
led to longevity.
Right. That's great, actually. You brought a very good point. In the olden days, like your father's generation, they used to be factory workers, and they also used to work on their homes themselves. So when they have to rehab their home, so that actually increased their skills as well as it actually inherently made them active. So they didn't have to do a separate activity of exercise. But now, in current generation, all the jobs are sedentary, most of them, and so that makes people to find a routine for doing exercise. In those days, it was
Right.
part of the life, right? Activities was part of the life.
Yes.
And
Well, I was fortunate because I could continue with athletics going forward. I played the athletics in high school, and then I played intramurals in college, and then the tennis I played the rest of my life. I still
right.
play, and so was able to continue these interests along with some hobbies that I've had. But I think the important part is the building of a disciplined routine and result, which leads to better habits. Is if you can get it into a routine and you can get a good result. And I was a smoker for like 2 years when I started Arthur Andrews, when I thought, gee, everybody smokes, so maybe I should smoke. And then it messed up my tennis game, so I quit right away. And my wife, the same thing. She smoked for a while and then quit. And neither one of us can imagine ever touching a cigarette.
I
Yeah.
know. So that was more like, I think some of these habits, whether it's smoking or drinking, is more like fashion statements and peer pressure that, rather than real health benefit or anything. And once people realize it, I think they will stop you doing that, right?
Well, that's part of maturing, I guess. But we had family early. We had Christy when I was 21 and my wife was 20.
Mm,
And we were always the youngest parents in grade school and PTA. And then we had Kim 2 years later. We were 23 and 22, or 24 and 23, something like that. And then my son, we finally got a son. And so we were, by the time we were 30, we had 4 children.
mm,
And today, most marriages don't start until 30,
right.
35. The average age is up in the mid 30s almost. But
Mm,
the other thing that has, I think, affected us is that we have never, I don't think we've ever threatened divorce, ever. Now, we've both said, you leave or you leave, and we both wouldn't leave because neither one of us wanted to give up the children. So the glue relationship early on in particular was the children.
right.
And that then led to I feel, a successful marriage all the way through our lives, and is taken the same route in their lives
Right.
with their children.
Right. That's a very good point. I think a majority of the families where children are not doing well in education or dropping out of the school, or if you look at the contributing factors based on studies, stability in families will lead to stable education and stable.
Yeah, I believe.
um, yeah, so I believe that they are the most contributing factors. Now that's a fascinating story on how to learn more about, because I came into this country when I was already grown up. I'm an adult, so I didn't know how life is in the olden days in the US. I've seen in India but not really here, so it's fascinating to know. So tell me some of the hobbies you developed. You write, and you read a lot of things, you study, and then we are equally fascinated with your wife's skill at painting and those kind of things. Two things. One is that this keeps you engaged, whether you're working or not working. You're mentally active.
Yes.
If you have a hobby like writing, reading, painting, those kind of things. And secondly, how did you get into this hobbies? How did you develop and cultivate these hobbies? And
That's a
before you answer, does any of your children have similar hobbies? Did you inculcate these things into them as well?
No, I am, with our children. I always encourage them to pursue their dreams and what they really chose as hobbies. My one of my daughters is an artist, professional artist. The other is a professional court reporter. My youngest daughter has a family, so now she'd stay at home, but she also had a jewelry, making her own jewelry and actually getting the materials from China, if you can believe that. And my son is writes music,
Mm,
and his desire was to be an entertainer. And then he got involved in my business and is now a computer whiz. But no, my hobbies in the past they were developed probably after I got out of high school more than they were before, because I always had an interest in photography. I got an 8 millimeter video camera, which I never used much. But when I finally got a reflex camera, I became obsessed with the taking photos of the family.
mm,
So I now on my computer have some 14,000 pictures that I've taken over the years, and then loaded on a flash drive and gave them to my 4 children for a Christmas gift last year so they could have access to them. But then when the photographs were developed, and I never developed my own, I always sent them out. I then put them in an album, and I would write something with the photograph. And then that's how the whole writing of the poetry began. That has been a hobby. The photography and the writing together, it's the lens and the pens together
Mm,
make a life. And so now the legacy that I have with the family is I provide them with a Christmas card every year with a photograph that I've taken. And then I also provide a calendar which has photographs of the family principally that I've taken. And then get albums for their particular family from all these. And it's much easier now uh, with the cell phones, because I used to, and I still have, the big 300 millimeter lens that I like to use so I can get close up with people and they don't know that I'm taking their picture.
mm,
Now with the cell phones, I've kind of been pushed out of the family portrait photographer role, and everybody's taking pictures.
right,
And it's great. It's great.
right.
I probably got 28,000 pictures included on my cell phone and my computer and who knows where. So those hobbies and the sports continue to be, and then dancing. My wife and I began our dancing at the recreation center in Indianola when we first met. That pulled us together, and then that has been going on ever since. Every Thursday night we go dancing. Sometimes we go on Friday night, or maybe Saturday night.
What is the dance form you learned and you practice now?
The dance squad.
Dance form, is it,
Oh, it was rock and roll.
rock and roll? Okay. Okay,
I
that's
mean,
interesting.
the Elvis Presley days. The Beatles came later,
Right,
so it was always. But we slow dance, but we are not ballroom dancers.
right,
We disco, anything that comes along, we pretty much dance to that,
right.
because it's having the rhythm to be able to not, you know, be embarrassed or shy in getting out on the dance floor, because we overcame that a long time ago.
Hmm. That's actually good. That's a good thing because in any movement in any form, and you enjoy it, that gives you, that's actually, it's a twin benefit, right? One is that you're getting some kind of an exercise, and
Yes.
secondly, you're getting out and trying things and be active. How did your wife get into painting as a hobby?
Um, it was in Morton, Illinois. I started out in Chicago. They went to Springfield, an accounting firm, came back to Peoria, accounting firm, and then we had a home in Morton, Illinois. And when the nest emptied, she started making suits for me. If you can imagine, business suits. And I'm telling you, I don't wear a suit unless it's, looks great. But she is somehow was able to be a tailor just by getting the patterns and the material. And for years, she made my business suits, include three-piece
Oh,
suits.
really? So she learned tailoring and she would like create,
Oh,
cutting the whole thing and stitching the
yes,
suits.
yes.
Wow,
It
that's
take her about
interesting.
a week to shoot, but and then she did upholstering. She could do that. She took up painting by taking painting lessons in Morton, and that was one of the best things she ever did because she's good at it. And my daughters are artistic. My second oldest daughter has made her living on commercial art, being a commercial artist. And my youngest daughter, who she also has made a living, but on professional. It's not classic art, it's business, commercial art. And then my oldest daughter is a court reporter, and that's a great business. It's her business. She's the entrepreneur, other than myself and the family.
So court reporting is an entrepreneurship. I thought it was, what do they do when, I mean, basically they are going into the court, listening to the hearings, outcomes, note it down and publish it. What do they do? Is that what it is? Reporter's job is?
Court reporter, yeah, that's the start of it. everything's electronic these days. She can input 260 words a minute, but it's all a special language. You know, it's phrase, it's series of letters, not individual letters. But that's just the beginning. So she goes to take a hearing. She records some of it, but most of it she is a professional at this point. She's certified at the highest level, and then once they get the transcript, she has to go through it and make sure everything is spelled right, and all has all the punctuation. And so she's creating a perfect document for the attorneys and the opposing attorneys and the client's attorney. And so then is, she has her own business. She started out as a reporter in the courts for the county, and then she got a job outside of that with as a freelancer for a lady, and then she eventually set up her own freelance business where she doesn't employ the court reporters. They are independent contractors with her, but she's the one that establishes all the contacts and processes the fees and pays them their share. So it is a small business.
Okay,
But
that's
for
interesting.
20 years, she's had that business, and it's, you know, it's rare because starting to move more and more to recording of it, but they lose the perfection that they have in terms of the presentation to the court.
Mm-hmm.
But she says that she believes it'll never
Go away.
It'll never be replaced. It
Oh,
has
yeah.
to have a human element.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
And her daughter has now become a court reporter, and she's one of my daughter's freelancers.
I see. I see. Oh, so mom, daughter working for mom on a contract basis. Interesting.
Right.
So let me pivot to the other side of it. Now, you talked about your hobbies, and which will keep you yourself as well as your wife busy, and as well as your extracurricular activities like dancing, exercising, which keeps you active. How about food habits? Did they change a lot? Do you still make food at home, or do you buy a lot of stuff, processed food from outside?
Well, when we were recently in our consulting business, we traveled full time all over the country with nursing homes, consulting with them. So we ate out. But what we did to be able to maintain our weight where we wanted it, first of all, I was exercising every day, and then my wife also got into exercising. But we split portions. We could not each have a separate portion. You know, they're so big. So then we would split the portions in the evening. The lunch we probably would have, but we were always, we read a book, Fit for Life, in 1978 it was, that was written by vegetarians. The whole advice is about, you know, you don't eat after 8 o'clock, and you don't eat again until after 8. So you give yourself 12 hours to digest, and you're eating more vegetables, more. Since they were vegetarians, they didn't recommend eating a lot of meat.
Mm.
You're going to eat meat, is fish and chicken and white pork, and but always a lot of fruits and vegetables. So when we were eating out, we were eating salads. A lot of the lunches were just strictly salads or a fruit plate or something like that. But I had to have my protein too. If I'm out, I was running 7 miles a day.
Even
So
while traveling? Even while traveling?
Yes. Yeah. I was going out and running before we went to work. And or exercise room at the motel. Every motel by that time they had exercise rooms, but I had to have protein, so we had to have the dinner meal was mostly, again, not just meat and potatoes, but it was we're not anti-beef, but we're not just beef. a lot of fish. Well, we like, my wife was brought up catching the fish and eating the fish, and I had no fish when I was at home, and in Indianola, it was just beef and potatoes or pork and potatoes. But later on, as we uh, evolved into our current diet, which is now, and I have to mention that my wife and I are 80 years old. She'll be 80 on October 31st. Will be 81 in November, and we still are very concerned about eating the right things. And so we're going to have in the morning, we're going to have some fiber, cereal, but no processed foods. A lot of eggs and bacon, because that's kind of what we were brought up on breakfast. Lunch will be a salad, or we won't even have lunch. We'll have an early dinner, and most of that is these mixed salads. I don't know if you go to the grocery store anymore, rather than having to buy all the ingredients and put the salad together, it's all there in a kit. And so we have a pork chop and a salad and some vegetables, or we could have chicken, or we could have salmon, or we could have tilapia, or we could have a steak. But we kind of alternate and shift it around, so we don't have just red meat day after day. And we used to have quite a bit of hamburger. We don't get hamburger anymore. Again, we're following this Fit for Life diet that we learned in 1978.
Mm.
I have never really been more than 175 pounds, and my wife has never been more than 116 pounds. She had four children, gained 17 pounds for each child, because in those days the doctors wouldn't let you gain weight. If you gained any weight, they were concerned. And it's different today, because the mothers are told eat for 2 or 3, and then all of a sudden they put on 60 pounds and they lose maybe 40 of it, and their 20 pounds still added on to what they had. And that just culminates in obesity.
Right.
So we believe, and our daughters have been that way. You don't gain, 60, 70 pounds when you're pregnant. So my wife gained 17 pounds after she had the child. She lost the 17 pounds, almost most of it in birth, and we're able to go on, from that point on, not gaining weight. And so we have the philosophy, which is rubbed off on our daughters, is that you have to be concerned about what you're eating, and getting some exercise even when you're pregnant. And so these habits and lifestyles have rubbed off on our children
That's
to
very good.
their benefit. We never imposed them on them, but they just embraced them because they could see that it was working for us.
Right. Right. That's great. Actually, the reason why I was asking you all of these questions is because, few observations I'm making is few things. One is that your discipline, your routine, your mindfulness, even while you're traveling, you're exercising, you're running, trying to keep physically fit. And the biggest contributor, I think, is your portion sizes and your mindful uh, cutting down on overeating, and splitting the portions of food is a wonderful idea. I always I always thought when we go to a restaurant in the US. In fact, this is a observation I actually made, and I spoke to a few friends and they were confirming it. If you go to a restaurant in US, the amount of size, the portion size is bigger than you go into Canada, for example. In Michigan, once I went to Ontario, to Canada, when I was in Michigan, if you go to a restaurant, the size of the portion size is bigger than you across the border. I think Americans tend to give more food in the restaurants, and that leads to more eating, more portion sizes, and then leads to obesity. I think that's a good idea that you're splitting the portions. And so I think if I summarize your life experience so far, it is good, family background, good education, good food habits and good lifestyle habits, exercise and hobbies, and good family values. All of these, I think, contribute to longevity and happy and peaceful life looks like.
Well, I wanted to kind of backtrack a little bit because in our relationship, Sherry and I's relationship,
Yes.
we got married so young. You kind of go through stages of partnership. Initially it's infatuation and more emotional, and then it matures into you're kind of going in different directions. And when that happens and you're not communicating, then other things sneak in to the relationship. And so what we discovered when I was running the nursing homes, I was so absorbed with that. When I come home, I didn't communicate. And so we decided to be able to get back to the communication skills we used to have. We would start walking. So I turned running days into walking days with her. I never imagined that I would be walking instead of running, because I thought, oh, I'm really healthy running. And I never did get the running high until the day I quit. And that's when I really liked running. That's when I didn't have to do it anymore.
Right. But how did you manage this? How did you manage during winters?
Oh, I went out at all. I used to go out on zero. I
Really?
can remember my brother-in-law and I running on a morning where there was 80-mile-an-hour winds and it was 20 below zero.
Hmm.
But we had the clothing and we covered our face with Vaseline, and we didn't last long. But no, I ran rain or shine, snow or rain. I mean, ice, ice or snow. That was the obsessive part of it. So I'm confessing I'm an obsessive. What
Compulsive
compulsive?
runner, which is a good obsession to have, right? Obsessive compulsive exerciser and physically fit. That's a good
And I'm
good
not
obsession.
recommending anybody get into that, because I'm more fit now by not running. Of course, I do get on the treadmill. I don't run on the treadmill. I have an elliptical. I get on that. I have a stationary bike. I have an ad machine. We do yoga. We do leg exercises. My wife had knee problems. We've cured that with some of the exercises. We go out and walk. We've walked as far as 8-9 miles together, holding hands.
Even
We'd
now,
go.
you walk 8 miles.
No, not now.
Mm,
No, 3 probably
mm.
is the farthest we'll go. But because again, some knee problems. But
Right.
we'd go to the track indoors and walk holding hands. And people look at us like we were nuts, except the women say to their husbands, "Now that's what we should do."
Right.
So we walk holding hands. We rollerblade when we were rollerblading, and we had to give that up because it's a little dangerous.
Right.
Rollerblade hands. Now, I'm not commending everybody's lifestyle. I'm just saying it brought us together.
Right.
And ever since, we have communicated 100% better, got past a lot of the problems that either existed or were going to happen as we aged. And here we are. We're still doing it. Okay.
Great.
That's
That's
what I recommended my son-in-laws, but I'm not. They listen to me.
it's I think that requires a different kind of thought process. Exercise. See, the difference is some people get into the exercise routine when they come across when they come across health issues, but yours is a completely different story. You're passionate about running and physical fitness, and that helped you in the long run. I think that's one of the contributing factors, isn't it?
Well, the greatest feeling I have now today is getting up and feeling fit,
Right.
and
That
feeling that I have to do something today to sustain and maintain that feeling. And it's a great feeling. I don't want to feel tired. I have energy. I mean, you're around me. I have tons of energy, maybe too much in some respects. My writing is now an obsession. I've written 17 books, and poetry was a big part of my life, as I have stated. And so, I have these things that still sustain this feeling of fitness,
Right.
mental and physical. And my wife and I to do these things together. We go to the exercise room together. There are other things we do together we won't talk about. But anyway, the relationship was built around walking,
Right.
walking, talking, holding hands. And if I would get off too far off on politics or sports or something, she'd say, just go ahead.
Hmm.
And it would wake me up to the point is if you want to walk yourself, go ahead. Just go
Hmm.
back to running.
Right.
So how to tweak my uh, head a little bit.
Right.
But I recommend that to anybody and everybody.
Right.
And walking is the easiest exercise you can do.
Right.
You don't
Right.
have to walk 10 miles an hour,
Right.
one step at a time.
So yeah, that's great conversation, Jerry. I really enjoyed it. I think this is your experience and your disciplined lifestyle is a great example for youngsters, not only youngsters, even for older adults and older people to change. Even see, it's never too late to change their lifestyles, to improve their health and to improve their mental fitness, to develop a hobby and have a routine. I really enjoy this. I'm sure it is a great learning experience, educational awareness for anybody who watches our show. I really appreciate your time.
One of the things I should point out is uh, we were around the elderly because we had for 40 years, we had an accounting firm, consulting firm, and then we owned nursing homes around the elderly. I always had I don't know, a feeling about the elderly that we're leaving them behind by putting them in confinement. And nursing homes are confinement. Assisted living sort of becomes confinement. We don't use. It's not just rehab. I mean, rehab is after you break something or pull something. Or I'm talking about restoring
Right.
people to health. And we did that in our nursing homes. We were able, through my philosophy about wellness and fitness, to put these programs in effect in the nursing homes. So we had them walking. We had a gym in the nursing homes. We had happy hour on Fridays. We had an environment that stimulated restoring function, not just of the body, but of the mind.
Right.
And that was my philosophy for getting in and ownership is I still believe the way we have to do this thing called aging is we have to restore people's abilities and capabilities and functioning, either in not an institutional, it's best at home.
Right.
I still believe that the COVID, if fighting that off with a strong immune system comes from each person dedicating themselves to being healthy. Because if you're not going to, you're going to be a statistic.
Right.
And I want to be the guy that lives to 100 and does 100 push-ups because I do my 80th birthday. I did 80 push-ups without stopping. I will
Wow.
do 81. I will. My goal is to do 100 when I'm 100. And
That's a great thought. I think I think we are running out of time. But
okay.
I
All right.
I enjoyed Zoom has this 1 hour limit, right? So it'll start indicating to me. Anyway, I would like to take this as a thought, and I wish that you should do 100 push-ups without stopping for your 100th birthday. And number one, number two, I would like to take this as an inspiration for myself and anybody who's watching this program, either today or tomorrow in future, they'll all learn from you. Thank you very much, Jerry. As always, it's a pleasure talking to you, and it's a great educational experience whenever I talk to you.
Well, you're a great partner in this because we can relate. And the only thing I didn't mention is I'm going to have a glass of wine after we're through.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Enjoy your wine and enjoy your weekend.
And I still ask you to come have dinner with us sometime.
Will
So
do, will do. We'll certainly do. We'll certainly do. Thank you very much
okay.
for your time. Have
Thank
a
you.
good night.
Yeah, say hi to Selene.
Will do. Will do.
Bye.